Hey, fellow G&Ters, those of us who like our spirituality with a twist. As you will already have heard from Daniel's introduction, we have the pleasure of having on today Marvin Mendez to share his wisdom, experiences, and insights as a family law and divorce attorney. Thanks so much for coming on, Marvin.
Eric, thank you. Dan, thank you too for including me and letting me be part of this fantastic project you guys have.
Yeah, of
Ah,
course. No, we're glad to have you.
As your last few episodes said, right? This is the journey, right? And you guys are just putting it there for me. So
Yes, yes, that's right.
well, we've been doing these episodes called Nine Things That Can Fuck Up Your Life, based on the old classic Taoist teachings. And it seemed like so fitting. Number three is, making your personal life work, right? Making
right.
your interpersonal relationships work. And, obviously you deal with the parts when it doesn't work. So I was thinking about, we talked a little bit off mic, and I was talking with Daniel about how to talk about this because I think in the culture overall, there's always an assumption that marriage is kind of like a good thing. And I'm kind of thinking more, I guess maybe it's the Buddhist part of me. I tend to think of it a little bit like kind of a neutral thing. Can be good for some people, could be bad for some people, could be in the middle for a lot of people. Um, and so, I kind of take that attitude. And, you know, uh, I certainly have been in the situation where I've had people I know and love and care about where I've said, I don't know if this is right for you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about this one. And other people where you say, well, yeah, that's a good thing for that person. Kind of is in a range. But it made me wonder, like, what's a good first question? And I thought, well, maybe the good first question is, with all the experiences that you have, what kind of advice do you give people, even like before they tie the knot? What kind of things do you think are good pieces of advice or bad pieces of advice, or situations where you kind of go, well, maybe this isn't a good thing? I don't know if you ever do that as an attorney. I know you do prenups, but anyways, I thought I'd
Yeah.
get your thoughts on that, maybe before the process even starts.
Usually when they come to me, it's not really when people come to me, it's not really a situation of looking for my advice as to whether marriage is the right fit for them.
Mhm.
Uh, by the time they get to me, they're either trying to figure out a problem, how to get out of a problem, or how to find a solution to their problem. But I think more from my years of experience and my
Yeah.
years of marriage, right? I think, those that are looking to get married, now compared to what I used to do many years ago, I tell them marriage is a wonderful thing, right? It's really just about, do you want to get into it? And then do you really want to be a part of something that's greater than yourself? Because at the end of the day, you're involving yourself in a partnership, in a selfless partnership that they're willing to give to each other or without any conditions attached to it. Um, and I think one of the biggest secrets that I always tell a lot of friends and clients as well, the secret to marriage and avoiding a lot of these arguments is always knowing that whatever the other person is doing for you is never with ill intent, right? And I think that if you understand the foundation of that there's never an ill intent, that the person wants to do something. You may not like it, and you may not agree with how it's being presented or how it's being approached. But that person, when they're doing something, I think they're doing something with genuine love, care, and a desire to make your life better, which then ultimately makes their life better. And not in a way that they're giving something because they're being selfish because of how good it makes them feel, but because it really just wants to work things out as part of a unit, as part of a whole. So those are generally the biggest conversations that I have with those people that are just getting into a marriage, that are looking to get married, or in a secret to doing prenuptial agreements, right? That those that haven't received any advice from anybody else other than you need to protect your assets and that's what you need to do. I look
Mhm.
at it from more of like, okay, we removed the emotional component, we figured out what was necessary for this. Now let's look at this from a logical standpoint. And I think that as you have that as your foundation, that person's actions are never without ill intent, you can get through a lot of the stuff, right? Even if there's nuances in communications that the two of you disagree on how to approach it or discuss it. That's generally what
That's
we're doing.
really interesting. So from your experience of, like, doing your work with people, when you boil it down, I think what you're saying is, that if you can go in with that attitude, if I'm building something that's separate from the two of us, that we can kind of dedicate ourselves to, that seems to be like, is that the moral that you've taken home from a lot of your work of watching couples going through things, that
It
takes
is
that kind of attitude?
100%, right? So when people come to me, they're generally in a position of like, okay, all hell's broken loose, right? Like we can't be compatible anymore. but I don't think that it's all of a sudden, right? It just happens all of a sudden. I think it's just years and years over time, or months and time over time, that things seem to fall apart when you start thinking, making things a lot more personal than they need to be. And then every single yawn or stretch or burp or whatever it may be, right, ends up frustrating the heck out of you. And I think there's those people that just, with the right foundation, none of this stuff ever really becomes an issue, right? And the foundation, a lot of that is in the communication and the openness. And look, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, right? And we're super sensitive and super delicate to, what one person may agree or disagree with how you view things. Um, and it's natural. And I think that if we can just be a bigger person and see beyond that, and knowing that the other person's intentions are with goodwill and generosity, yeah, you're move on. And that's how I see marriages working. And that's why I think now marriage is a wonderful thing. And like I was telling you earlier, I never thought marriage was a wonderful thing. In fact, my wife, our foundation was, oh, you don't want to get married? I never want to get married. This is amazing. Let's hook up, right? Let's hang out. Let's have the best time ever. And
Yeah.
then marriage happened, right?
Mm.
And then it became the next step, right? Oh, you never want to have kids? I never want to have kids. And we had a kid. Oh, you never want to move to the suburbs? I never want to move to the suburbs. And guess what? We're in the suburbs. Um, but it took time to really get through a lot of that stuff, and a lot of understanding through it. And our foundation generally was, we just didn't have a desire. Me, from a perspective of having seen, parents going through a divorce, or understanding that they went through it. Her, perhaps whatever uh, lack of mentorship in marriage, right? She didn't have. And also for myself, being a divorce attorney, I just saw the end of it. And I never understood how people ever got there until
Mm.
many years of experience.
How long were you working as a divorce attorney already when you got married? Was it like deep into your practice where you'd already seen all of these sort of stories going wrong? And it took that leap of faith maybe to go, oh no, this can go right. Yeah.
Sure. So I was in family law for, let me see, 126, maybe like 5, 6 years before that, right? And I already seen a lot of the stuff, and I seen just like some of the toxic stuff. And notwithstanding, one of my mentors previously saying to me, we're family law attorneys. If we can save the marriage, we can save them, and we shall save it. If we can't save it, then we save the marital estate because it belongs to them. We work hard for it. And I try to use that as my foundation as much of it, but it was never really that the basis of wanting them to get into a marriage. From by that point, for me, it was like, this is broken. I just don't understand it. Why do people even exhaust themselves in a relationship, or wanting to continue to impress themselves in certain ways with the other person, and have different points of views between each other? But as time went by, and frankly, a lot of the roller coasters between my wife and I in our early years is what
Mhm.
then later taught me the beauty in marriage, right? And the partnership. And one of the things you said earlier, you were right, right? Marriage is not for everyone. Yeah, if there's red flags there, like, just call it out, right? If they're so far apart from each other. But I think there's also something about human nature, that their willingness to quickly give up and not really try and figure out what they do have in common. What is that common denominator? And that's one of the things that my wife and I ultimately ended up looking at, is what were the common denominators? What were the roots of our respective issues that we had this discord? And once we
Mhm.
started going through that, whether it was therapy or in-depth conversations or moments of silence, uh, do we start to understand that this was actually greater for us, and then us. Uh, and we didn't look at marriage from a religious standpoint, right? Or for, any other way. We really, I think, looked at it more from what did this life bring us here to learn, right?
Mm.
What are we learning from each other? What did I miss in my past life that I'm here to learn today?
Mm.
Right? And we both found out a lot of things about each other, and really discovering who we were at our core and our essence, that we just became an open book to each other. And then
Mhm.
that started being the foundation of a fantastic partnership, in my opinion, that then taught us how to love ourselves before we can depend on being loved by someone else. And then we just created this full circle of trust, where it's like, no matter where I am and no matter how angry we are mad at the moment, but never at each other. And that allowed us to really just be open with ourselves. And that is how we created a strong marriage. And that's why I then started to believe marriage is an amazing thing. right? Once I knew I loved myself, once I knew then she would wholly love me no matter what the argument was, things just turned out amazing. And I think she needed that comfort from me as well, right? Because she needed to know that no matter what she did, I will love her no matter what. And then from there, we can then start building a future and laying the foundation for many things, which then led us to a child and mixed finances at some point, right? Because the first few years you're like, hold on, I'm going to keep this bucket to myself. And then later on, we started figuring out how to just start merging things and knowing that you wanted to take care of the other person to be taken care of.
There's a kind of a universal truth aspect to what you're saying too, because no matter what the relationship is, like we both have kids. So whether that's your
Yeah,
kids or a romantic partner, a wife or a husband or, family members, you have to kind of build those things you're talking about. They're universal truths of like,
yeah,
what am I learning with this person together? If we want to think karmically, right? I have some karmic connection with this person. What are we learning together, right?
yeah,
In
yeah.
the marriage, and we're doing that, and we'll learn that way together. Or, but other people in your life, you're going to do that with too. I think about that with my kids. What are we learning together, right? It's the exact same philosophy you're outlining, right?
I
It's
agree.
a
I
beautiful
think I
one,
remember
right?
having
It's a beautiful one.
it is. I remember you remind me of a great conversation where I had with my daughter once. We were going through this, and this is at a much younger age for her, through this complex conversation, and she was very upset with her, right, or whatever the issue was at the point, and she was upset with herself. And I turned around to her and I said to him, like, you know what? I know you think I'm upset, and I know you think that I know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. This is my first time as a father, right? And I'm going to be making so many mistakes along the road. And just be patient with me, and I'll be patient with you. And we're both going to learn a lot from each other. And we're going to both learn what we're here to learn about how to be better humans and how to be better citizens of our community, how to be a better partner, how to be a better listener, right? And whatever role we play, right? There's no defined role as I'm your dad and you're my daughter, right? I understand the logic behind it, but you know, we're all here to learn from each other, right? And so as long as we keep that an open mind, that creates a solid relation. And I tend to use that for a lot of my relations, whether it's my partnership at work, whether it's my partnership at home, whether it's my relation with our daughter, whether it's our relation as the three of us, right? Daughter, wife, myself. Um, just being open to the idea that like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. We don't know what we're doing. I've never been married before. I've never been a father before. I may not. I may just be a new soul on this planet.
But we're
Marvin,
learning this together, right? And the idea is that we're going to trust each other, that we have good intent, right?
Yes,
Sorry,
absolutely.
Daniel. Yeah.
Marvin, you had mentioned something earlier I thought was interesting, and you talked about like loving yourself. You
Yeah.
know, do you? Let's open that up a little bit because people who are listening, some of whom are partnered, maybe some are married, some are single, some in between. Maybe throuple, maybe more. Who knows? Depending on how lucky they are. You know,
Amen.
um, yeah. So I guess my question to you, based on your experience, like, do you, and just to me, just your own personal life too, like, do you think that that is a thing that is widely experienced in life? Because you deal with a lot of couples on both sides of the things, and do you think it's widely experienced, and do you think that it's maybe not a prerequisite to be in a successful marriage, but do you think that it is a foundation? Because I don't. I'll see what you say, and then we'll go back and forth.
I, I I don't see it in a lot of people. I don't see it in a lot of people, and I can see it in the nature. Whether let's talk about it from a divorce perspective, right? It's always the spouse that allows themselves to be cheated on or walked all over or disregarded, uh, or the spouse that is the narcissist that wants things done. And what I mean by all this is they're looking to fill a void, right? A void of lack of love for themselves. And that's why I'm a big proponent, and only after years of experience, of experience in this, right? Like, being in my relationship early on, I have no idea who I was, what I was going through, who I really, I didn't understand myself. I didn't really love myself. And I think it's huge that to understand and see that commonality throughout a lot of relations that people don't really tend to love themselves. They're always looking for someone else to love them. And when you're looking for that someone else to do something for you, you then allow yourself to be controlled or walked over, and feeble in the relation, shall we say. And it's not that until sometimes until you go through a divorce, do you finally start recognize your self-importance, right? Start to know who you are at a later age. And I think that also comes with time and perhaps getting married, either having a strong foundation as a youth, as a child, and being, unconditionally loved so that you can be like, I love myself and I'm fantastic and I'm great. Or going in life and being not married until maybe your 30s when you've gone through your education and established yourself financially and you can support yourself and provide for yourself, knowing that you don't have to depend on anyone else, that you then start to discover how to really love yourself. And in divorce situations, a lot of people are in it because it was the first thing that, excuse me, in marriage situation, the first thing because the first person that paid attention to them, the first person that cared to listen to them, and they felt that that was their entire world, and they will accept everything and anything, including being cheated on or being physically abused. And that was their definition of love, right? And like I like to say sometimes, love, 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 whatever that is, and that is to that certain people. So I think, but once you do have that, uh, you can have a stronger relation because then you're not so dependent on someone else, and you're not willing to change yourself for someone else. Is at least what I've noticed in family law, and from that perspective, and from a personal perspective as well. And it's been tremendous. And and that's what happens, right? In family law, a lot of times, Eric and Dan, is in family law, you have this light bulb that sometimes goes on in the spouse and says, that's it, I'm done, right? Whatever that is that turns on the light bulb, decides to be like, I am done. I am moving on to the next chapter in their life. And there's a strength that gets built into them. And then the arguments start in family law because the person who is used to being the controlling partner in that relation isn't so used to the other person finally standing up for themselves. And the person that's finally standing up for themselves are the ones that are saying, screw it, I don't have to deal with this. And the narcissist, shall we say, is then that has this scorched earth mentality that if it doesn't happen my way, it's never going to happen. And it moves on and just becomes this big clash in dissolution of marriage cases that are unnecessary. Um, but a lot of this could have been resolved if there would have been some respect for yourself and some love for yourself at an early stage in the relation and not wait before things got so heated.
Interesting
Was
because
it,
like,
it was a, what did you say in your earlier session? Your authenticity, right?
Yeah.
Like being authentic to yourself. I think
Hmm.
that's an important thing. And you don't really get to that stage until later on in life, until you discover yourself.
yeah, it's interesting because Daniel and I are clinicians and we tend to like frame things in clinical ways.
Mhm.
And what you were talking about just fits something that crossed my path recently, like someone I know who's going through a divorce and it's gotten nastier, right, as time has gone on. And I obviously see those things all the time. But looking at the dynamic of what you're describing, it seems really true to describe them. It looks like the one person always felt, rightly or wrongly, that they were being put into the more powerless position,
Yes.
right?
Uh-huh.
There was some kind of power imbalance between the two people that at least they felt. Whether the other person felt it or not, I don't know.
Sure.
I know better the one person who's being accused of being the too powerful person, not I don't know the other party as much, but the relationship is now in divorce, right? And I mean, that seems to be the underlying thing. And it looks like from his point of view, I know the woman in the couple, basically, he
Mhm.
was like, yeah, this whole time I've been sort of the powerless person. It's the first time I'm standing up to you.
Yeah.
Almost exactly what you were describing. This is his moment of rightly or wrongly. I don't know. I'm not in their worlds, but it's the first time where he's standing up for himself in this way from his
And it's
point
a
of view,
beautiful
right?
thing. It's a beautiful thing to start to know yourself, to um, understand that you're not just something to someone, but you are part of something greater. Like I have sometimes, for example, women that come to me and they think that they're not worth anything. Or I have men that come to me and say, well, I'm not going to give her this or do that. And I always remind everyone, particularly those that have families, that particularly, the narcissist person where they're trying to say this person shouldn't be entitled to anything. And I did everything and it's only me, me, me. I always say it was like, did the dry cleaning walk itself to the cleaners? right? Did your kids just all of a sudden grow up and go to a fantastic university because you were there while you were working 80 hours a week, right? Did the food just magically appear? Did you attend a lot of social events by yourself? No. So everyone played a role in the relation, right? And sometimes the person who's more dominant in the relation doesn't recognize that. And then once you start going through this process, the person who was sort of the wallflower, shall we say, just shines bright, right? Just reflects
Mm.
bright. And it's a beautiful thing to see that. I think the thing is you got to find a balance sometimes, because in family law, what ends up happening is the person who was hiding in the shadows the whole time, all of a sudden it becomes this big energy explosion. The other person disagrees, and it's a scorcher policy on both ends. And the only ones that end up benefiting are the attorneys with the massive amount of fees that they end up getting paid on it. Um, and it reminds me of this quote in a Netflix show that my wife and I were watching, Enola Holmes,
Oh
where,
yeah.
yeah, there was this one part where I think the brother said to her, "You're being emotional. It's understandable, but unnecessary." Right. And I deal with a lot of that stuff in family law. And people are driven by emotions. It's, you know, if there's one thing that's predictable in family law, is that emotions tend to drive the decisions. And until they burn through their savings and retirements and whatever it is that they have, do they start to become more rational in terms of like uh wanting to have a case settled. But time also has been one of the factors, right? You know, time is a construct, and you know, until they realize time has gone on, things have healed for them. Do they start to settle down and start to be more realistic in how to move forward and emerge as a stronger, independent person, right? One scales it back and recognizes that they've been too stubborn and too, you know, hard-headed, and the other one brings it up a notch and says, I got this. I'm a strong person. And we move forward from there.
You feel like a certain amount of time you're trying to spend kind of like cooling people's jets and like taking the amps down, turn the amps off to 11 and bring them a little bit
Yeah.
lower.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
know, I wear many hats in this role as a family law attorney. There's the friend, there's the therapist, there's the attorney, right? There's the mediator. Um, and you got to learn, you got to know how to balance that out, right? You can't just every single moment and placate them, but you do have to give them some room to let it out, right? A good cry is always a good thing, right? I always encourage her, like, cry it out. I'm a big fan of crying. Let those emotions out. Once you've relieved that out, then you can come back and start talking some reality and some sense to everyone. You know, in my line of area, generally there's people with parents and excuse me, parents with children. And Eric, you'll understand this, is I always refer them to Dr. Seuss's and the waiting place, right? I don't know if you read that story to your kids often.
I
And
did that
always
one.
about, you know, the people just waiting and waiting for the train to go or the bus to come or the plane to go and so forth and so on. And everyone's just in the waiting place. And I always tell them, while we're going through this process, this is where you are emotionally, right?
Mm.
But the very next page is that somehow you'll escape that place, all the waiting and the stain, and you'll move on to a place where boom bands are playing, right? And I just have, and that's really more for an understanding for them, is you will be in that place and you have to go through these emotions, because now you're going on to the next stage in your life and you'll move on and things are going to be fantastic. They always turn out fantastic.
That's
Some
kind of like
reason to
very
work.
Chinese. That's kind of like the idea in the old Chinese books, like the Tao, and you know the yin and yang goes up and down. And so, okay, now you're in a down place. If you can get to this down place, you're going to get to the up place. That's the only place it can go, right? And also like
Yeah,
encouraging, let's stop looking at the past. Let's not get of what we're going to cling to the past and what this person did or where the resentments are. You're going to be better off if you just go forward, right?
100%, right? And
Yeah.
you can take the philosophy of, you know, scorched earth, right, approach, like I've said earlier, or you can take the philosophy of an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind, right?
Mm.
I rather avoid the former and make sure that they understand the latter so that we can just move forward effectively, right? And I think a lot of the new things that I'm seeing now, because perhaps people are willing to work it out, and there may be different reasons, right? Maybe they're just like, man, if I leave here, I'm financially screwed. Or if I leave here, I'm too old and I don't want to start again. Or if I don't fix this, I don't know what's going to happen. And so what
Mm.
I'm seeing nowadays is people attempting to salvage their marriage by removing the financial components out of the way. And similar to a prenuptial agreement, we're doing a lot of postnuptial agreements. I'm not feeling you right now is usually the conversation. Things are a little bit off. I don't know what's going to happen. I'd rather dedicate 100% to us repairing a relation without having something over my head that I don't know where it's going to go. So people come in and say, look, I want a post-nuptial written that says, if we divorce, this is how assets are going to be divided. This is what support's going to be paid. This is how we're going to move forward. And so if that stage comes up, we just ask the court to affirm the terms of this agreement and we move forward. But right now, doing that, it gives me peace of mind that I don't have to worry over the threat that I may be left with without anything, or over with the threat that you may take something away from me that I believe I'm entitled to. And it allows people then to then just focus their energy on building their relation and saving their marriage, right? Because some people do believe marriage is right for them. They just don't want all this ugliness attached to it. Uh, and
The
so
history,
that, you know, in connection with therapy.
the history thing is interesting because it was kind of like an economic thing, probably at the root,
Right.
but the idea of it's evolved to now like, no, now we're talking about something different. We're talking more about love and partnership and building this thing where it's almost like there has to be a transformation of something that probably was an economic concept historically to now we're like, where people are almost like reinventing it like almost in like the time of our lives almost, right? You know, where like the economic things, let's look at this differently. Let's not look at this just as an economic partnership. Let's change the framing, right? Which
It
almost seems
is.
like what you're saying. Yeah.
Absolutely. And especially in a world where you're right, you know, marriage historically has been, you know, from a little bit that I know in terms of its roots, uh, here, take my daughters or son, right? And you take care of them financially so you can support them. And in exchange, I'll take 3 goats, whatever that was, right? Once upon a time.
Oh, that's a good trade, man.
You got robbed. You got robbed.
I got 9 for mine, but three is good.
Three is good.
You could have got her for a goat and a pig if you would have
Yeah.
like, yeah,
And, you know, whatever,
a couple of
right?
kittens. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And,
But you're
and
right. It's a
so
yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah, and so, you know, people are seeing it a lot differently now, right? It's no longer rooted in, you know, staying tethered because of religious requirements or staying tethered because of financial responsibility. In a world where both men and men, women and women, you know, regardless of the relation or dynamics behind it, where they can all support themselves and provide for each other, right? They're willing to say, let's work this out, right? There is something tangible here. There is something greater than us here, right? Or as my wife likes to say, you know, a transcendental kind of love.
Hmm.
And I think once you know that, right? Look, we're always stuck between life is short and you only live once. So like, so how do you maximize it in either occasion, right? And find something that really gives some meaning. If that's something that's important to you, right? If it's not important to you, yes, I've had those folks that have come back for prenuptial 3 times or 4 times because they just love the idea of starting something new, right? Of the new journey of something, you know, that's at the beginning stage when they're just sharing themselves with someone else and learning someone else about something new. You know, that always that little spark that you get of a beginning of relation. That's sometimes that's what they chase most of the times. And that's fine too. And that's fine too, right? I think that's always a beautiful thing too, if that's where you find your happiness in.
We've done episodes on sort of that kind of serial monogamy too. I was using a friend of mine as the case study.
Yeah.
And he says that there's a timer on it. And old friend that he says, yeah, it goes about 7 to 10 years. By your 7 or 8, nah, I'm starting to feel like, okay, I want to like have that experience again. I can't blame the guy. It's his way of, his way of being in the world, I guess, right? I guess you see people like that, what you were describing. They
I
go into
do.
that the
I
newness.
do, and I've always been curious to know what drives that. I don't think I really put my finger, right? Because, you know, from my perspective, right, a person who loves marriage and advocates for marriage from a, you know, from a higher understanding, a relationship understanding, right? A partnership, a true, you know, partnership. Uh, that concept just sort of seems to be something foreign to me to, because from what I see it, it's like, okay, you're just you're resetting yourself over and over and over, and you're going through the same thing over and over and over. And at some point, you're just a glutton for punishment, right? If you know you're going to end up in that 7-year itch or 10-year itch, because, you know, whatever physicalities exist, they're the same from person to person, right? There's nothing really different unless you find a higher connection. And I think that's sort of where the marriage component falls in, that partnership. Uh, and the tax benefits, right? Why not?
I definitely think that higher connection makes sense. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Marvin, let me ask you. So, in this process of relationship, we're talking about the people who are involved in the relationship, the adults in the room, if you will, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, we've looked at some of these studies before, but about 50%, 49, 51, whatever, of marriages end in divorce. So that means that a large number of our audience members, parents are divorced, probably half, right?
Right. Correct.
If they're an average sample size, But
Mhm.
what we have yet to mention is the children.
Mhm.
And from the child of parents who were divorced, and I don't know about your parents, Marvin, we've never discussed this. Are your
Sure.
parents still together? Are they
No, they're happily divorced.
happily divorced? Okay, so from children of parents who are divorced, we always go, oh yeah, our parents got divorced when we were blank years old. Right?
Mhm.
You're dating somebody and you talk about their parents and they say, okay, when I was 2, when I was 10, whatever it is.
Mhm.
But that's kind of the end of the discussion. The one person that gets forgot about, or the people who get forgot about, are the lawyers who made that divorce happen. But the lawyers never forget about the children that they're working with. Even if they never meet them, they're working with the parents who had them. And in some cases, the idiots who are going to run these kids through a life of difficulty. So I'm going to ask you a difficult question now.
Please,
Um,
Bridget.
and maybe we'll record it and you could put it on your LinkedIn or something like that. Would you be interested in verbally penning a letter to divorced children on behalf of the lawyers who do the dirty work in separating what once was done with good intentions, as you have said?
I think there is certainly a poem to be written there, right? The forgotten ones, shall we say. Um, but I do think that, I think up until a few years ago, the children were sort of the consequence of these divorce actions of these two knuckleheads that just didn't seem to grasp that their actions had uh, tremendous consequences on other people's other than themselves. And they were just so focused on their, those battles or war of the roses, shall we say, between the two of them. And until recently, I think there's been a tremendous shift and really focusing more on the best interest of the children and ensuring that they succeed. And I think a lot of the younger attorneys and the newer generation is more inclined to, uh, you know, bring more light than heat into these divorce proceedings, uh, and ensure that ultimately the kids are the benefactors. Meaning, all right, we're not going to spend their money in all these legal fees because we know that there's college expenses that need to be paid, camp expenses, lifestyles, and things of that nature. I think that a lot of attorneys now are always inclined to say to one parent, by example, that is continuously saying, no, I've been the primary caretaker of the minor child. I'm the only one that did this. And attorneys are just saying, well, oh, okay, that's fine. Maybe you were the primary caretaker, but let's really break that down and figure out what that means. Did you make the sole decision? No, I talked to him. Okay, what did you talk to him or her about? What generally we wanted to do and what were the things? Okay, and when you consider these options that were available, did you just make these decisions on your own, or did you look at, well, is he or she going to like this, or he or she going to like that, or are the kids going to be enrolled this? And at the end of the day, it really boils down to always telling his parents, you never did anything alone. Everyone played a significant role. So now, because you think that you're the better parent, or you think that there may not be the best parent, let's just be realistic. You may not do things the same way. There's a different approach or something. But at the end of the day, there was always the common denominator that both of you always wanted what's best for the kids, regardless how you got there. You may have gone a straight line, and the other knucklehead may have just smelled the flowers and chased the bees all over, but still got to the same point. Um, and I think that's sort of what we're focusing now on, ensuring that these kids' lives don't get damaged, right? Because back in the days, myself, I'll give you an example. I was, a victim of my mom's unnecessary angst towards my dad, right? Because of his irresponsibility, shall we call it. But I had nothing to do with that. To me, my dad was still my dad, and I loved him with all my heart. And my mom was still my mom, right? And but that's just that it wasn't like that historically. It was like the mom had to take care of this, and this is all. And those sort of thought processes are sort of moving. We're moving away from them in reality, and the law is becoming a reflection of reality because now the law is more cognizant of like, look, unless you're absolutely a danger to the minor child, there's no reason why you shouldn't have at least equal parenting time, right?
Mm.
You may fight the other person for it and you may increase the cost of litigation doing it, but the end result is still the same of maximizing both parents' time with these children. And so I think law is very reflective of what society is doing nowadays. And I think that our future is pretty bright because these children are seeing different role models in
Mm.
their parents. And they're avoiding that vicious cycle that perhaps you and I, right? And I'm just assuming here, right? If you guys went through the same process in your youth, but we're ridding ourselves of that vicious cycle where it just had to be one way. And like I always tell parents too in situations is the way, for example, if I have a father, right? The way you treat your wife, assuming you have a daughter, if you mistreat your wife that way, your daughter's going to be like,
Yeah.
well, that's how I'm going to accept that, right? Because that is what I know to be love.
Yeah.
If the father has a son and he sees and his son is seeing the father mistreating the wife, belittle him, or the wife belittle him and smack him around, whatever, then that's what he's going to define as love. And I think nowadays we're really, really separating ourselves from that by really encouraging people to just say, you build your wonderful relationship with mom, you build a wonderful relationship with dad. You may not agree on things a lot, but everyone, back to our initial point, right? There's never ill intent in your actions. You may not think about it and may not be the wise choice of how you approach it. Um, and maybe a knucklehead comment or mood, but it's never with any harm, right? Or intent to harm your children. And I think people need to realize that, and people are realizing that. And I do think that the next generation is going to have a different, I think it's going to have a better future in parenting, whether they end up divorced, right? They may end up
Mm.
divorced themselves, but they're not going to be divorced with the idea of like, I'm going to keep my kids away from this jerk or this knucklehead.
Kind of
Um,
weaponizing the situation against the spouse that
yeah,
you're angry with and all that kind of
yeah.
stuff.
Eric, that's just a disgusting thing to bring to children, right? And like
Yeah.
these kids, you birthed them, you brought them to life, you were there from the very moment. And regardless of how you feel for your other partner now, once upon a time, I mean, think about Wedding Crashers, that scene, right? You guys used to love each other. You guys just used to go out in the back of your, Chevy, whatever it existed once upon a time. Remember those days and embrace those. And then just learn to be like, you just weren't compatible for one reason or other, or you gave up. But that doesn't mean you're giving up on the family.
Yeah, like I mean, you're saying a couple like I'll just put some psych terms and other things on it. This whole thing, they
Please.
call it social learning theory, like how you see someone treat someone else.
Yeah.
You're going to learn how, like, that's an interesting. I mean, I was like, oh, yeah, that's really profound because if you're right, if a daughter sees the father treating the mother a certain way, they're going to like take that upon themselves, as that's going to seem like how you're supposed to tolerate behavior, even if it's something nasty that you're just taking it out on this person that you used to love and now you don't anymore, or you're angry
Yeah.
with. Yeah. You've
100%.
also done
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Mhm. I was gonna say, so my poem would be like, you're gonna be fine, right? You're going to be fine, right? And obviously a little more articulate, right, fashion, but I think off the cuff, that's what I'm trying to get at.
You've also done this really deep thing that like is very Buddhist. So I'm just going to throw it out there because sometimes that's my job on this thing to do this stuff. The psych thing or the Buddhist thing, and Daniel does the shaman thing. And, but it's like there's a very Buddhist thing of like having gratitude for what people did. And they make you do these meditations that are like, hey, other people have done a lot of nice things for you. Your spouse has, and in this case, we're talking about that. But your family did nice things. Even if they did bad things, they did some nice things. So make sure you see that side, or the people just in the community around you. Just have that gratitude because you said a number of times you didn't do that all on your own, right? This other person was contributing. It wasn't just you. Maybe you have resentments towards them now, but look at all those things that they did, and it kind of turns down some of the resentment a little bit, right? It's a Buddhist
Well,
meditative thing almost.
yeah. Well, let me
Yeah.
ask you this, Eric, for my own personal edification, right? And perhaps helping folks going through these tough times. Egos are huge in family law, right? Especially when you start, right? How do you, or what do you say to someone to recognize that gratitude, right? To really embrace the good things that someone else did. Well, what would you be your advice to say, hey, take it down a notch, you know?
Well, it's almost like you were saying the things that are so right. Hey, remember back in the day when you used to love this person so much? Look at all the great things they did for you. Look at all the great love experiences and I mean even sexual experiences and
Yeah,
social
yeah, of course.
experiences. They helped you do this, they helped you do that, just to remind the person. They do this kind of meditative exercise, that's big in Tibetan Buddhism, where they ask you to like kind of visualize the person in front of you and take in all the negative experiences and energies and pull them into you and then clean them up and then send out the good vibes back. So they ask you almost to do that sometimes to see if that won't help you to feel maybe energetically different with the other person, but along with this feeling of gratitude, while you're doing that, remember the good things that person did for you, right?
Yeah,
Combined with that little meditative thing. I don't know if that helps at all, but that is something they ask you to do. Visualize the person in front of you,
it does. I think
feel
that's
that
really,
exchange.
that is actually quite important. And I see it from family law perspective that, the clients are never really talking to each other. They're only talking through the attorneys, or they're talking through this other application that the court has created to monitor. This is how sometimes bad it gets. There's an application that's out there that, the courts require the parties to communicate through this application. Uh, and it sometimes measures your level of toxicity. And it tells you, like you're at this level, right? 8, 9, whatever, take it down before you send it out. And it's a good
How does
guiding
it do
post
it? Is that
because
an
then you can use
AI
it.
thing or how does that work? What is it?
I think it's the verbiage that you put in there. You can either
Wow.
start with here USOB
Uh-huh.
versus,
And it
okay,
digs
backspace,
in.
backspace, the level starts coming down.
I never
And
heard of that before. Have you heard of that,
That's
Daniel?
I've never heard of it, no.
Really.
But by the time you're done, it's like, hey babe, I'll be home tonight.
yeah.
Where
Thanks
that
for
little,
everything, honey.
yeah,
Where
where
is the
that thing
alimony payment
online,
that you owe me?
you know.
It's interesting because it helps, right? Because you're letting your anger out in these messages and you're typing away. And then by the time you get down to it, it's like, oh, I could have said a lot more with a lot less words. And then it allows me to start. I always tell my clients, like, start your email, write your poison pen letter, whatever you want to do. Do not hit send. Do not put anybody's name in the to section. Do not put anyone's name in the BCC or CC section. Just write it down. Come back to it in the morning. Digest it. Right.
Right.
Once you fully digest that, then you realize, okay, I need to calm down, because if you don't, it just triggers a response and a negative response and another one and another one. And then unfortunately, in family law, sometimes the attorneys take on the ego, the alter ego of their client, and
They're
feed
the
it
they're the
stuff.
anger translator.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, or the one adding to it, to be honest, Dan, like there's moments where attorneys like, oh, you're talking to me, and then you're like, hold on, no, this is not about you. It's about these two. Scale it back. But there
Mhm.
are egos out there that need to be fed.
I
Uh,
guess I have to ask, like I was asking Daniel if he watched it. Believe it or not, I watched it with my 10-year-old, maybe he was that age, Marriage Story, the Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson thing, because it kind of, I mean, you're talking about your ethics from a very high place and a very spiritual place, but that kind of gets into the whole, I don't know what you call it, the business aspects of that too. And I don't know. I mean, if you haven't, did you see the movie?
no, no, no. But I've heard things about it. It was on my list, and I think I did get the gist because when it came out, there's these family law chats, right? And so people
Oh,
just started saying how on point a lot of things were and how people should extract information. So my knowledge stems from, all these chats that were going on about it. But I'm a bit familiar over it though.
yeah. Do you think, I mean, like the obvious question, and you're again, complimenting you, you're coming at this from a very high-minded place, right?
Yeah.
What do you think of your peers in the profession? Like, do you feel like your attitude represents the majority opinion or a strong minority, or how do you see that? Because obviously we can all tell you're talking about this from a very high ethical place. So,
So I think that the level I'm now, Eric, that is been doing this for a long time
yeah,
to really understand, we're just humans, and I don't need to bring, you know, more heat into this process, right? Like my goal is to scale it back. And that's really my philosophy. But there are a very small portion of family law is a very small um group of people in Illinois, and so everybody tends to know each other. So you're
Mhm.
always your first set of questions when someone calls you for potential representation is who's the other attorney and who's the judge, right? And then we can clearly be like, okay, it's going to be fine. We're going to mediate. It, we're going to go through this process. Here's what I can expect to go through. But there are some that really thrive on, taking on your client's personality or pounding their chest, right? Because they feel like someone needs a bulldog, right? Or a pit bull, whatever, choice of spirit animal you need at that time to represent you. And um, they go through that stuff. And what do? Right? Do I sit there again, like I said earlier, eye for an eye leaves everyone blind, right?
Mm.
Sometimes my clients are like, you're not being too aggressive. I'm like, what is my aggressiveness going to result other than just a heftier bill for you? I'm more of we can either go to mediator, present our positions, have them scale it back, go to trial, present our positions, let the judge decide, rather than feed into that. Um, in fact, I think I received one of the best compliments from a seasoned attorney a few months ago, where we hadn't had a case, but we have heard of each other, in crossing paths through other attorneys, et cetera, and by reputation. And he said to me, like, the most impressive thing is I can tell when you're mad, sad, happy, but you're very straightforward and don't let those emotions really guide you in your argument for going on. Because there were some heated moments in this case that we were at. And I chose to just continue to talk like this with the acknowledgement of like, I'm not going to pound my chest for anyone. I know I'm a great attorney. I know what the law says and I know what the facts are. And I'm also a parent, so I can understand where people are coming from an emotional standpoint. And I'm not going to feed into that. But a lot of people are, I think, more and more headed towards this direction of keeping things calm and cool and not having that, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Not having that image that people need, that they need a bulldog or a pit bull, right, to come represent them. It's unnecessary.
To
In fact,
fight
a
for
lot of
every
people, nowadays come to me and are like, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. How do we keep this cool? And they test out your personalities to see if that's the person that you're going to work with, and it turns out fantastic that way.
So do you feel like you have people who maybe are looking for that more bulldoggy person, and then you're kind of like, well, I'm not the right person for you, or they just decide that you're not the right person based on
I think
meeting?
it's a combination of both, right? I always encourage people to go interview attorneys to see if you have the right personality.
Uh-huh.
Interview attorneys and then come back to it at a later stage to see if that's really what you want and hear from different sides. Hear from me, who's going to tell you, I'll listen to you and I'll hear you, but I'm never going to placate you, right? And I'm not interested in that relation. I will give you my advice. You can make your decision on your own. You're a grown person at the end of the day. Or they can go interview someone that it's like, yes, I'm going to kick his or her butt. We're going to take everything that we're going to take. And, and the client's like, I want everything. I want the house, the car, the kids, and everything. And then what do they say to them? Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that's what they want to hear. $500,000 later in legal fees, right? They realize that's not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Laura Dern character, I think, in Marriage Story. And she
Oh, I
does
gotta
kind
go
of a
watch
great
this now.
job. And it's Scarlett Johansson who's, the couple, Adam Driver and her, and it ends up being a big fight over kids. So it's painful to watch. It's the kid that's money and kids in the middle of this, which I'm sure you deal with all the time, right?
Sure. Sure.
But yeah, there's a scene where Laura Dern, I don't want to ruin the movie, no major
No,
spoilers,
I'm okay for
but
endings.
it's sort of like she kind of like Scarlett Johansson goes in with the initial attitude of like, okay, I'll try to make this as expeditious as possible. And it's almost like Laura Dern kind of does this great scene of like going, well, we can go farther, we can get more, we can get more. Maybe you deserve more. And she like it's a great piece of acting. I don't know how true it is to life, but
There's
she
truism
kind of
to
like
that.
does that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of truism to that, Eric. There's a lot of people that feed on because you think, oh, you're entitled to it or you deserve it.
That's
Like
kind of the way she frames it. Yeah.
and you're fine, right? And that's the beauty of the law, right? The law is right there just to give you guidance, right? Like worst case scenario, this is your tiebreaker. But
Mhm.
mediation is the best thing because it allows you to figure out what you can do and what you can live with and how you're going to continue that relation. Here's one big example. So in mediation, I always tell people, you're going to have to preserve this relationship, right? Your kids are only 10, 8, 5, whatever. I mean, you're here for a longer term. right? You get more, more bees with honey than with vinegar. And frankly, people are receptive to that and
Mhm.
open their minds and hearts to want to have a cordial relation in the process and figure out how to balance it, right? Sometimes people say, I want this, I want the kids 50% of the time, that's it. And the other parents so adamant, there's no way you can do it, your schedule, you're traveling or you're busy, etc. And so you give it to them. And then the other person realizes, you know what? I'm glad I kept an open door. I can't do it. It's not feasible. You stay at home and you help me. And then you renegotiate that. And it's wonderful, that avenue. But there are those people that truly and genuinely feed into, you deserve more, get more. Yeah, that's right. Get him or her. And I don't get it, right? Just because it's there doesn't mean you need to take it.
The fascinating scene because it doesn't seem like it's only totally about the money or something. It's a lot about like you deserve more and like look at all the ways the opposite of what you were saying. Look at all the ways this person caused you wrong. Look at all like emphasizing that as opposed to what you were saying. Okay, at
Yeah,
some point you love this person. They did a lot of good for you. You
yeah,
know, frame it more in
absolutely.
that way. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it always comes, it turns out really well when people do recognize on their own, like, you're right. I'm not going to screw anybody out of certain things, right? I'm not here to screw anybody. It's fair. It's fair. It is what it is. I'll make more. She'll make more. We'll do well. We've saved enough. We're established. Things are going to be fine. It's fine. It's fine. The kids are fine. The house is fine. We're fine. We're established. Um, but when you do have people that give you that feed into that ego that you deserve more. And
Yeah.
think about it, the person who's going through divorce may be going divorce for the first time, so they don't know any different, right? They're not a person going through like their eighth divorce and understand that they can tell the lawyer no. Person who's going through the first time, you're at your weakest point, you're at your most sensitive point. You trust no one but your lawyer, and you assume that your lawyer knows what's right for you. But I always tell my clients, like, look, I will give you advice as to whether something is a good or bad choice. I will tell you what the law provides for. I will tell you where you need to go for this and what options you have, what your exposure is, and what our strategy is going to be. Whether you choose to accept that or not, it's entirely your choice. Like, I can't force you into that. And many people appreciate that, right? And a lot of people, there's many times when they come out with some deals where I was like, this is the worst deal I've ever seen. But it's your choice. You want to move on and you think that you're ready for this. Go ahead, take your time. And it works out well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think like a real good piece of advice that you just like gave a little bit ago was you should really see multiple attorneys and find the one that actually fits with your personality and philosophy. And I thought about that with psychologists too. Daniel and I have talked about that a little bit. You got to find somebody who fits you.
Yeah.
You have a bad fit between this person and find the person that, resonates right. I think that's a great piece of advice too, right?
And,
Yeah.
and the beautiful thing, for example, in family law is, when you're first choosing your lawyer, you may think this is the person that I want. But like anything else, you can always change your mind and go back to the other person. I've had those situations where people
Oh,
come back, months later, they're like, I'm sorry, I went down the wrong path and my case is a big mess now. Let's just scale it back to what you initially suggested we would do, and let's just go down that avenue, right?
is
But
it often when the person's trying to get more and they realize, wait a minute, this wasn't worth it. I better come back and
yeah,
have a
exactly.
more.
Right now, my kids won't talk to me. My wife isn't talking to me. I'm bleeding money. I'm tapping into my retirement account. My friends won't even connect with me, whatever it may be, right? Like things just fall apart. Uh, and people realize later on into the process that maybe it's just better to take a different approach.
Yeah, I think if they were doing those 9 things to fuck up your life that we were talking about before, they had a 10th one, which is like being vindictive in these relationship ending things, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Oh,
doesn't do anyone any good. I mean, from my experience, you don't get anywhere. Family law tends to be a very predictable. It's almost as plugging in something to AI, and I can tell you exactly where it's going to go. Right? It's
oh.
just in the minutia, right? Of like, tracing specific numbers and moving some numbers here and there, or figuring out what's scheduled up. But generally speaking, it's nothing earth shattering, right? We just know that parenting time is a dynamic concept as kids grow up, their needs change. And as you probably may or may not know now, your kids probably aren't talking to you as much anymore because they're, interested in hanging out with their friends instead of being entirely dependent in you, and the older they get, the less they want to hang out with you. And sometimes parents don't see that, and so you could always, go with the flow, right? And change it as much as possible if you could. Um, but it's an interesting process, and I think soon as people start to um, understand the effect that it has on their kids or themselves, do things start to settle, and yeah, it goes back to you. You can go look at different attorneys and decide which is the best avenue for you at that time.
Do you mind if I ask you just a couple of case studies? Are you cool with that, Daniel? I got a couple of ones I thought
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would.
yeah. We'll do that and then we'll wrap it.
Okay. I don't know how much time you have,
No,
Marvin, but
go for it.
I can keep talking and you guys can edit as much as you want. So
okay. I,
yeah.
Oh,
you know,
no, there's no editing here, Marvin. We're busy people, my brother.
you don't realize
understand.
how low tech this is.
Yeah, no, this is straight up low tech, brother. You know what I'm saying? This is a cut and paste at best. You know what I mean?
Low key, low tech. That's
Yeah,
it.
for sure.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, like Daniel, like said, hey, we're having on Marvin. I was like, okay, cool. So what should we, I was thinking of different things to ask you about.
Yeah.
And just again, like Daniel and I being clinicians, we have these cases that we've seen. So I thought I'd just get your opinion maybe on a couple of these.
Yeah, if I can.
The one that jumps out to me, obviously in the end, you end up pay attention to the ones that go badly or the situations that turn out badly. So I had one person I knew for a really long time, and she got to the point where she wanted to get out of this marriage. I think she had a lot of doubts going in. She was one of the people I knew who I said, "Are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
Are you sure? I'm not sure this is right for you, and I'm not sure this person is right." Anyways, we knew each other for a long time. Eventually, she wanted to get out of this relationship. But what happened to her was she felt two things, and I don't know if they're relevant or not. So I was just curious to see what your opinion would be, because maybe it'll help other people who might be in these kinds of situations too. So she ended up staying, but the reason she stayed was almost entirely like kind of pragmatic. She felt like she didn't have the financial freedom to leave, which is one of the things you brought up earlier. If you're too financially entangled, so she found herself in that thing. And I think she decided in the end her husband was a very litigious person, and he would never let things end. It would go on forever. And she was very afraid of that. And she
Sure.
had some problems in her mental health history. And so she was afraid, okay, if we get into something where there's going to be a legal fight, all of my issues will be trotted out and he'll like never stop. And I'll end up fighting this person really over the most important thing for her, which was custody of her kids.
Sure.
Like for the rest of my life, I'll be going over this. And his family came from another country. So she was worried, okay, what will be the implications of all of this? So I thought I would just throw it out to you because it was really
Sure.
painful to watch her go through this. And again, not being an attorney, I tried to help her get connections with attorneys, but I think, she was so afraid of the whole situation.
Sure.
So I know just as a case study, what would you think of something like that? Do you have advice for people who
So
find themselves?
yeah, I think, well, I'll address the financial freedom component first, right? Because that always tends to be, notwithstanding the importance of the children, the number one topic is, what am I going to do? I depend on this person entirely. I have nothing. It's not in my name. And I think that a lot of those folks that come in scared because of the financial freedom or lack of financial independence just never have an opportunity to understand that there are options that are available to them, right? So, for example, some people come say to me, well, everything is in his or her name, period. So in his or her name, we didn't have a prenup, but he's tied everything and he's always told me he's going to screw me out of everything.
Mhm.
Uh, Only after understanding to them that regardless of how it's titled, it's considered a marital asset and she'll have an interest in it and she'll be fine once we discover what's out there and what the support is going to look like and what the status quo is going to be like during the process. Do they then start understanding, okay, maybe I can borrow some money from my parents to start the process just to get the ball rolling, and then everything else is going to, fill in the back end, and I'm going to be fine. My questions are like, are there retirement accounts? Yes. Okay. You'll at least get half of that. Is there a house? Okay. We either stay in the house or we buy out or we refinance or we, take other steps to ensure that you can assume the loan, right? And get some equity out of that, or you're going to get some income from this other source. If there's children, child support, you're going to be fine, right? And that's really the big thing. It's going to be fine. If your hesitation is, I'd rather stay in a relationship that's abusive because I don't know if I'm going to be able to financially afford it, then you're going to be stuck in that rut forever and you're just never going to get out. And that will be your legacy. That is your entire life. And what lesson did you learn in this life then If it's not, it's going to be have to be pushed on to the next life. But my advice is like talk to somebody, right? There's attorneys that are willing to give you, free time to like tell you what your options are and know what's on the table. And I get a lot of those calls. Been thinking about doing this. I don't know what I want to do. How am I going to do? And I just say, hey, just snoop around, gather some basic information, tax returns, bank statements. I can give you sort of a high level of what to expect in that matter, and you'll be good. And they leave with that satisfaction. They come back, right? On the
Situation where I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Was there any
Yeah.
situation where, you know, say an example of this person I'm talking about with her husband, is there any situation where she could say, you have to pay for my attorney to get this going? Or does he have the right to block that? Or how does that work between
Oh
people? I
yeah.
think she was very afraid of that.
So there's various avenues, right? And obviously, attorneys are always gonna, they're attorneys and they're businessmen, right? So you got to look at what cases you take on. But there are, for example, some financial legal entities some legal entities out there that provide support, for spouses of limited means. Or there are some entities and lawyers out there that'll give you some preliminary advice. And sometimes what ends up happening is this person may want me. They're like, I need you, Marvin. You're exactly what I'm looking for. This is the step that I need to take. How do I retain her? And I give her my retainer amount, my engagement letter. They're like, I don't have the money. But they go borrow the money, at least to start off from their parents, from friends. Once you're in that process, the law does allow you to petition the court for the person who has a primary income to provide for the legal fees throughout the process.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily he's paying for it or she's paying, but rather it's coming off the top of the marital estate. So he can't say, it's all my money, you're not getting anything. They're like, no, that's her share. You're just holding on to it. And so they'll get it. But there are steps, right? To that once you retain a lawyer for whatever it is, some lawyers are willing to do it from the beginning, ask for a fee petition and have them contribute to their retainer. Some lawyers are going to say, pay me first, and then I'll take the care of the rest on the back end. And so those are options that you don't feel that you're always under the pressure to be like, I can't afford to stay in this process. And so what the courts have the authority to do is this thing called leveling the playing field,
Mm.
right? Whatever you're getting, she's entitled to. Both parties are entitled to representation, and there's nothing that would create an impediment that prohibits that person from being able to get competent counsel to represent them. And that happens more often than you believe than you think.
But she was really scared of the whole thing. You could see. And then in the end, she didn't do it. And it was, it was sad to watch. What about her?
Now you're there. Yeah, you're right. And now the kids think that that's what love is, right?
Yeah.
Like Tina Turner said, what's love got to do with it in those situations?
Yeah. What about her concerns about custody and mental health things and things like that? Is that
So
what?
that it, is it going to come out? Yes. Are you going to deal
Mm.
with it because somebody wants to play dirty? Yes. The question is, how do you deal with it? Do you front it or do you hide it? I'm a big fan of fronting it, right? And my thing is always, unless there's a serious endangerment to the mental and physical well-being of the children, it's worth nothing. It's just throwing mud at you, and it's gonna wash off. And you see that more often than not to prevent the other person from getting custody or being a parent in the child's life, to prevent the other person from making decisions. But the court has all these tools in place that allows a third neutral party to investigate the veracity or the seriousness of the questions or the allegations that are being presented. And most of the time, they're not as bad as everyone thinks it's going to be. I mean, I've seen people come in with DCFS claims against the other person.
Uh,
I've seen people come in with bipolar disorder. The question is, how does it affect the kids, right? If you left the kids with me before, and while you've been gone and doing your things, you have nothing on
but
me,
kind of
right?
like the
So,
situation is almost like you're willing to be for me to be the mom of these kids when we're living together, but all of a sudden we're not living together and now
yeah,
I'm in
yeah,
danger. But you're totally
yeah,
fine
exactly.
before. Yeah.
And it goes nowhere. And it goes
Yeah.
nowhere. Like you just toss it out. Unfortunately, you're just on the side of defending or addressing vacuous claims, not even frivolous, just vacuous, right? Just unintelligent claims that just have no bearing, no weight whatsoever, and spending thousands of dollars on something that really isn't worth it. But the likelihood of success of their allegations are generally very little. I mean, like it needs to be very serious, right? Like maybe you're a parent that's been in rehab for 13 times, right? 3 times is sort of the normal, but then 13 times, like, okay, there's no way this is happening. Like it's off. And even for a person that has had issues, right, that I've seen, whether it's mental health issues or bipolar, whatever it may be, the court is not inclined to immediately cut you off of the kids' lives, right? The kids recognize, I mean, excuse me, the courts recognize that kids love their parents in whatever incarnation you see them.
Yeah, kids have a bond, right? Karmic.
Yeah.
So I
Hmm.
guess like her fear was also what you were talking about. He'll get one of these bulldog attorneys and he'll hound me forever. Do you see those kinds of scenarios? And how do you help defend people from
Yeah.
that kind of thing? Because that was probably one of her deepest fears. This will never end. I'll be fighting this person legally for the rest of my life. He's that kind of guy.
And that's possible, right? What ends up happening is, and that's where you throw in that remedy of, okay, you want to do this? You're paying for the fees, right? I'm coming after you. You're paying for the fees. And look, I've had a case that has been pending since 2018, right? Where we went to trial for an entire year, where they settled the case within a few months, went to trial on the remaining issues, started appeals. We're come back from an appeal court, and we're still going through this process on how to resolve stuff because he is at the mentality. So it's like, I'm just never gonna let it go because how dare you leave me?
Yeah.
Consequences, paying fees, but you still got to move on with your life. You can't let that consume you, right? Just live with this parallel to what you're doing. Still continue to date, still continue to hang out, still continue to be with your family, still continue to vacation, live your life as normally as you possibly could. This is just going to be a thorn in your side, but that's about it. But I can't stop stupid from being stupid, and I can't stop him from filing frivolous allegations.
Yeah.
The response to that is, how do you react? Do we file for petition for fees to get him to pay for the stuff? Do we seek sanctions against him? And at some point, his credibility is going to go down the drain, right? Because the court's just not going to entertain their nonsense anymore. But you got to go through it at first.
I
But you
will.
can't let that be the fear to not doing anything, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like I was telling my daughter, like, every problem has a solution. Every problem is an opportunity for a new solution. That's what I try to encourage with folks as well.
You have to
Figure
kind of
out.
instill in the kids, like, don't do things out of fear too, right? I mean, that's a kind of a parental thing. Don't let things be afraid. You might have obstacles. You have to fight your way through them. Don't be afraid. It's a parenting thing, right?
It is, yeah. You've never done this in your life before. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place right there, Eric.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Don't be afraid, because I think there's people who because there's people who want to, who, and Marvin, you and I talked about this on the phone a little bit. You said there's people who be in relationships or marriages, and you say, well, how long have you been thinking about this? And they'll be like 7 years, 10 years, and you're like, well, okay, what what have you been waiting on? You know what I mean? Like, and I mean, I'll let you respond, but I feel like it's fear. Not doing it is out of fear, and sometimes that fear is founded, but on other times, I mean, if you were to tell somebody, hey, I want you to make some of your most important decisions on your life out of fear, people will be like, why would I do that? And you say, I don't know. Why would you?
I agree. And you're right. It's exactly the conversation we had before. Whereas, you know, I was thinking about this 7 years ago. I was thinking about this 10 years ago. Now my pension's gone X amount bigger, and now I got to share with him or her, right?
Mhm.
And it's always, well, I don't know, maybe the kids. The kids are going to be fine as long as you're willing to cooperate in a parenting schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any last kind of parting shots here, Marvin, before we call it an evening?
Uh, I just want to say it's been a pleasure. It's been very therapeutic for me, right? I'm usually the one that's listening to, imagine having 30 clients with, their kids, with 30 other attorneys on the other side, with, judges on the other end on a daily basis. And, this has been very helpful to like voice it out and look at it, right? And just even hearing myself talking to you guys, it's like, okay, I still made the right decision. I still
Mhm.
love what I do. I love family law. I love helping people out. I'm doing right by making sure that everything's like just very chill and even and focusing on the big picture. And at the end of the day, I think marriage is still a wonderful thing.
I can say, like, it definitely listening to you had the vibe, to use our favorite word, of being authentic. This was an
Yeah.
authentic vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were
Yeah.
speaking from a true place, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You guys made it very comfortable. I really appreciate that too.
Yeah, no, and normally we start off with a little bit of the origin story, but we kind of just like went right in hot and heavy right out the gate. So,
Well, there's too much important stuff to talk about with
yeah,
this.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Advice out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we'll have to have you come back on and talk about how you got into it in the first place. And because like I said, like 50% of marriages end in divorce. And so, you being a divorce attorney, you having parents who are divorced, I'm sure that there is a little bit of one feeding into the other in some way, shape, or form, even even subconscious, that would be interesting to hear. Because like I said, it affects so many people. And if not us personally, then maybe your partner. It affects almost, half the people. So
50%, you got odds it's going to affect somebody.
you got odds for sure.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. 50% of marriages end in divorce. The other 50% is in death, right? Till death do us part.
Yeah.
Rooting for the latter, right? Where love and partnership conquers all. But there are those 50% that then go and get married again, and then they end up in the same rut, right? And still the continuous divorce process. Because whatever it is that they're trying to satisfy, and I think you'll never realize that you're not trying to satisfy something, you just haven't really gotten to know yourself.
I agree with that. But you know what they say, Marvin? Third time's a charm.
I was thinking more like fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
We got a saying down in Texas. Isn't that our former great president?
Well,
Don't get fooled
without the
again.
stuttering and the confusion on that, yes.
Yeah, get
Yeah,
fooled again.
Exactly.
Yeah, Daniel, when we were talking about the episode, we were talking about, okay, well, we'll talk with Marvin about how you hold on to your personal property, but also hold on to your personal integrity, right? Then your
Mhm.
personal authenticity. And you're kind of like outlining a way to do this so you don't lose yourself
Mhm.
processing these things. So people can walk away with the feeling of like still feeling good about themselves, feeling good about the world, right? If you're gonna go and be all bitter on other people, you're gonna walk away a bitter person yourself. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely. I agree.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being open. We found that like having people on, it's an interesting listen, for people who are outsiders and whatnot. But then for the people who are on, find it like therapeutic to tell their story, in this kind of a way and whatnot. So it's a benefit for all, really. And I think that when people listen to this, they will see and feel your authenticity and the work that you're doing and trying to bring a stabilizing force in a oft chaotic scene, situation scenarios for people as they go through this part of their existence if they have to. And it's good to know that there are people out there who are trying to bring, as you said, light, not heat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually a big thing, right? How do we figure out to bring a way to bring more, light than heat to a already complicated process?
Yeah, I like that. So yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for chatting. We'd love to have you again in the future at some point. Eric, as always, thanks for driving the ship with me, brother. Thanks to our audience. Whether you're watching us on the YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple, or I don't know, whatever, Pod Addict. I don't even know. There's so many different places that people get us. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, we don't take criticism at all. So but feel free to hit us up
We
at
have a special
Jen.
app that just edits it out.
That's
it.
right.
We
Yeah,
don't anything
before
critical, it just changes all the language and the compliments.
That's right.
You know how to do that.
Your show sucks is awesome.
Sucks awesomely.
That's right. But feel free to hit us up at ginandtantra@gmail.com or hit us up on the Instagram at Gin and Tantra Podcast, or leave a comment in the YouTube section, like, subscribe, do all those good things that help out our show and our work in the algorithm, and share with people who you like and people who you don't like. And if you're getting divorced, share this episode with them so that might loosen them up a little bit, so they could stop being an ass. So, anyways.
Or a knucklehead, I think was Marvin's language.
Yeah, Marvin's a
knucklehead. Want to be a knucklehead, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I've aged myself, yes, with that choice of words, but
yeah, that's okay. That's
now you know someone to go to if you need someone, Marvin, right?
Yeah.
Take you through it in a spiritual way. Yeah.
Marvin, thank you so much for coming on. Eric, thanks again. Audience, appreciate it. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.